Services, Consumer Affairs, County Attorney, and Recreation in recognizing the contributions that the elders make to our community and to renew our focus on prevention and swift responses to acts of abuse against older adults. Signed this 21st day of June, 2022, by myself, Yabar Manos, and Sidney Katz.
All right. Let's take a picture. All right, thanks everyone. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is commemoration of Juneteenth by Councilmember Jawando. Councilmember Jawando.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Juneteenth. Happy Father's Day to everybody. Director Stowe, you want to join me up here? And anyone who's here to celebrate Juneteenth, you can join me up. Unless you're giving an interview back there, Jim. We're all a bit out of breath from the weekend's activities, and I want to just publicly thank Director Stowe and all of our Human Rights Commission and the Black Rock Center and all the partners for a wonderful, wonderful Juneteenth celebration. That was our county celebration this weekend. I don't know if you counted how many. I'll let you speak to that, but it was the first time we really, since the federal holiday was granted, and since it was the second Juneteenth here in Montgomery County that we've actually officially recognized as a holiday. But I think it was by far the largest gathering that we've ever had for this relatively new to some, old to others, holiday. And just as a reminder, because education is important, Juneteenth is the day that we celebrate here in this country, Freedom Day for African Americans who were formerly enslaved when in Texas, almost 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by President Lincoln, just a few miles from here. The final enslaved African Americans in Texas got word from General Granger after a deception, lying for several years, that they were indeed legally free. I think it's important to note that this was a celebratory day, but it's also a day to remember that freedom, justice has often been delayed for many in our country. And along that route is denied for many in this country. I often think about Maryland and here in Rockville, where we were one of the last states to free enslaved Black Americans. In November 1864, just a few months before Congress in January 1865 would pass the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery, Maryland, by referendum, about 30,000 votes to 29,000 votes, barely by the hair of its chinny chin chin, passed a referendum to free enslaved Black people in the state of Maryland. absentee ballots. We're a couple days from Election Day in D.C., a couple weeks from here in Maryland. Absentee ballots had to be counted from Union soldiers that had sent them in order to secure a ending of slavery here in Maryland. I think it's important to note that history as we celebrate Juneteenth, because it's a reminder that we have to continually secure freedom and progress generation after generation. But all that being said, we had a great time this weekend celebrating. Heard from one of the original go-go bands, Rare Essence. You couldn't get a spot on the lawn, and people just celebrated and got together, and we're just so excited to celebrate Juneteenth. I gave you some history, hopefully, that you didn't know, maybe some that you did. But I want to just thank our county. I want to thank County Executive Elrich. I want to thank my colleagues that we had stepped up and started recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday even before the federal government did so. So it's really an example of how we continue to push forward and lead. And so I want to turn it over briefly to Director Stowe to give comments, and then we'll read the proclamation celebrating Juneteenth.
When Israel was in Egypt land, the call was, let my people go. They were so oppressed that they could not stand. The call was, let my people go. And so finally, at least partially, they did let our people go. But as you've heard, just partially. In the pronunciation of and proclamation of the Emancipation Proclamation, there's one piece that people often don't think about and don't actually read. Because there's a section within that proclamation that would suggest then that persons who were now the newly freed persons were in fact not to collect themselves at the military. They were not to be idle. And in fact, if they were to be idled, they indeed then could risk being arrested. And thereby then, for their punishment, being sent then to plantations to work out that punishment. And so the cycle continues. And in fact, it was not until December the 6th of 1865, the ratification of the 13th Amendment, and then in 1868, the ratification of the 14th Amendment, and of course the 13th Amendment ending slavery, and the 14th Amendment, of course, giving due process, equal protection under the law. And then in 1870, the 15th Amendment, giving us the right to vote. And even then, the struggle continues. Just yesterday, a state in this United States voted from the standpoint of a platform to repeal the Civil Rights Act of 1965. And so the struggle continues. You know, some of the slaves were stunned, Councilmember Gerando, when they heard the news. Some of them were in disbelief. Some of them said, what do we do now? What do we do next? And there were others who were leery of the untruthfulness of what they heard. And so the journey continues. And so, my friends, on this day, we do celebrate, because our theme for this year's Juneteenth was to memorialize the struggle, to celebrate the successes, and to move forward with securing the justice and equality for all of us. And so, yes, we must never, ever forget the struggle. It happened, folks. It is real. It's real. Regardless of what people tell you, it is real. We have had successes, absolutely. We've been able then to move beyond the point that many of us could ever even imagine. Some of them have been significant and historical. So we celebrate those successes. And we must ensure that every resident of this county, every citizen of this county, every citizen indeed of this United States of America is guaranteed due process, equal rights, all the privileges afforded each of us. And that, my friends, must not ever be negotiable. So there then is the celebration of Juneteenth. That's why we celebrate. That's why it's significant. And it will be my hope and fondest desire that all of us, regardless of your race or culture or station in life, enjoy this holiday and celebrate this holiday because it's a human celebration of all of our humanity. And that to me makes it different. And so I would hope then that next year the numbers are so overflowing that we don't have room to, in fact, to encapsulate them. I would hope that be the case. But more important, wherever you are in Montgomery County, that you realize that it is the Montgomery County way that we celebrate each other. We can do this in Montgomery County. Don't know about any place else. But we can do this in Montgomery County. So, my friends, as the new day begun, let us march on. Let us march on until victory is won. Happy, happy Juneteenth.
Amen. I was hoping you were going to sing.
I was ready.
I could see it was close. Come on, and let's read the proclamation here and celebrate Juneteenth. This is a county council proclamation from all of us. Whereas Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States, and whereas the Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Abraham Lincoln legally freed enslaved individuals in 1863, but many slaveholders in Texas continued to hold on to their slaves captive for 2.5 years after the announcement, and whereas General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865, and announced the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery. At that time, there were still 250,000 enslaved people in Texas. That day became known as Juneteenth, a symbolic date representing African American freedom, and whereas slavery set the foundation for hundreds of years of systemic racism, financial inequity, and health disparities for African Americans in the United States, while Juneteenth was a day of victory, primarily for those who were enslaved in Texas, it also amplified the injustices that kept those who technically had been free for 2.5 years from actually being free. And whereas Miss Opal Lee, an activist who at the age of 89 walked from her home in Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C. to call on lawmakers to make June 19th a national holiday. Named the grandmother of Juneteenth, Miss Lee eventually delivered 1.5 million signatures to Congress and achieved victory when the legislation passed in 2021. It was then signed by President Biden, establishing Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And whereas Juneteenth is even more important today, as African Americans across this country continue to fight to end racism and everything associated with it. If we really want to continue to break the bonds of racism, every American, as Director Stowe said, regardless of race, needs to understand and celebrate Juneteenth. Now, therefore, be resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes and celebrates Juneteenth, and be it further resolved that the County Council calls for all Montgomery County residents to do the same this year and all years to come. Presented on the 21st day of June on this year, 2022, signed by myself and the Council President on behalf of all of our colleagues. So happy Juneteenth, everybody. You guys want to stand up? It's a small group. We can use your numbers. You know.
Yeah. Colleagues, good news. We are ahead of schedule this morning, and our general business is not scheduled to start until 10, so we will break until 10 a.m. We look forward to seeing you back here in about 29 minutes. Thanks.
Hey, Mr. President.
Hey, Craig, we're starting in 5 minutes.
Excellent. I just wanted to just make sure if at the beginning I wanted to just ask if I could be recorded in the affirmative for the bills, for the two bills, 722 and 822, and then for the consent calendar. Sure. I should be able to be on for the afternoon session, but so I'll ask that formally, I guess.
All right, can we get a countdown?
Live in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
All right, good morning, everyone. We will now resume our general business. First, want to acknowledge Marianne Paradise, who's with us again today after a loss in her family. Marianne, we are with you. We're thinking about you, and our thoughts and prayers are with your family. And speaking of thoughts and prayers, I also want to acknowledge that we lost a significant Montgomery County leader last week in Reginald Felton, who was a 3-time board president of our Board of Education and also a member of the Board of Regents of Montgomery College. I had the distinct honor and privilege of working with Reggie on a subcommittee as we developed Excel Beyond the Bell here in Montgomery County, and was always struck by his ability to be able to bring communities together and problem solve around some really complex issues. He was an extraordinary leader, and he will be greatly missed. I will now turn it over to our Chair of Education and Culture, Councilmember Craig Rice, who is joining us virtually this morning to make a few comments on behalf of Reggie.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about Reggie Felton. As you said, a tireless advocate when it came to education. He certainly lived, breathed, and slept education, so much so that even after his 3 terms on the Board of Education, he actually served with Montgomery College, his Board of Trustees, but also started his own firm that consulted and dealt specifically with helping nonprofits to focus on education. His true belief was that everyone, if given the right supports, would be able to excel in the education space. And that is something that we believe firmly here in Montgomery County, that we continue to fight for each and every day. And so we really thank great giants and leaders like Reginald Felton, who did an amazing job when it came to certainly recognizing the importance of education and the attainability of high quality education levels and success for every single one of our students. We owe him and his family a debt of gratitude, and certainly his memory will last on for all of the great things that he has done for this county. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Chairman Rice. And now I'd like to turn it over to Councilmember Navarro, who served with distinction on the Board of Education herself. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was so sad to hear about the passing of a former member of the Board of Education, Reggie Felton. Reggie, the first thing that came to mind, of course, was his extraordinary infectious smile and his amazing positive energy. And that kind of energy just lit up every single room that he walked into. But that same extraordinary strength of positive energy is what he brought to the service, his service on the Board of Education, and then continued to serve in so many different capacities. I just want to share that it is so important to recognize the also very quiet support, grooming and mentoring that does occur that sometimes you just don't hear about publicly. But, as a new member of the Board of Education, I believe I was like 39 years old at that time, and just really venturing into this important space, he was one of those people who quietly, gave me quite a bit of support, mentoring, and orientation. And it's something that I appreciated so much, and something that I feel very strongly in terms of paying it forward. And so to his family, to the community, again, he definitely was a giant, not only spreading extraordinary positive energy, but incredible contributions to our county, to education, to the education space. And we shall all continue to do everything possible to maintain and expand and strengthen his legacy by mentoring and supporting those who then want to serve as well. So may he rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. And the third member of our Education and Culture Committee, Councilmember Jawanda, would like to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Mr. President, and so appreciate my colleagues' comments. I just wanted to say to Reggie Felton's, I know he can hear us because he's smiling probably, and his family. Just a devastating loss. I think about Councilmember Navarro, as you were saying, that the point of his mentorship and his kindness. I think a couple summers ago, I was in Martha's Vineyard with my family, and we have 4 kids, as you know, and one was wandering in the ocean, and Reggie and his wife were wading in the water there, and he picked her up and brought her back and played with her for like 20 minutes, and just I think an example of his kind of just kindness and care. And he's like, oh, no big deal. I won't charge you babysitting fees at all. Just a great person. And not only was so important to Montgomery County, he was important to the region. He was chair of the UDC, University District Columbia Board, George B. Thomas Saturday School Learning Center. He was a big advocate for that. He's been in this term advocating for funding for that institution to help children stay on track. And it's just a devastating loss, and prayers go out to his family, but just thankful for his contribution, his mentorship, and his kindness. So I appreciate the opportunity to say that.
Thank you, colleagues. We'll now issue a moment of silence to recognize and remember Mr. Felton. Thank you all very much. We now move on to our general business. Madam Clerk, do we have any agenda changes or announcements?
Good morning, Council President, Council Vice President, Council members. We have a few brief announcements today. First, expedited bail 2022 Office of Food Systems Resilience established. That public hearing will be held on June 28th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. Additionally, for agenda item number 9, public hearing for expedited bill 1622 special capital improvements project, 6th District Police Station. That action is tentatively scheduled for June 28th, 2022. No petitions were received by the council this week. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Rice is joining us virtually this morning. I'm going to turn to him in 1 minute after I make a quick motion here for approval of minutes. The clerk has circulated the minutes of May 3rd, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 19th, and the bi-county meeting on May 12th for approval. Are there any changes? Seeing none, those minutes are approved. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'd like to be reported in the affirmative on bills 7-22, 8-22, as well as the consent calendar.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. And
Thank you, sir.
Just quick housekeeping, colleagues. Councilmember Katz announced that he has tested positive for COVID, and unfortunately is going to be joining us virtually today. And out of an abundance of caution, Councilmember Navarro is staying at home as well because she was in close contact with Councilmember Katz, and Councilmember Rice is on travel with family. So they are all three joining us virtually this morning. With that, we now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a presentation. And this is a report of the Charter Review Commission. Ms. Wellens, I'll turn it over to you to introduce this topic.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. Good morning, council members. We have with us today Mr. Margulies, who is the chair of the Charter Review Commission. The commission has worked very diligently over the last several years and very thoughtfully under Mr. Margulies' leadership to put together two reports, and this is the second of their reports, the last one you received in 2020. And so I'll turn it over to Mr. Margulies to present the 2022 report.
Right, there you go. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. President, for this opportunity to present the 2022 report of the Charter Review Commission. In our first report 2 years ago, we undertook a study of a single but very weighty issue, namely the structure and composition of the County Council, which resulted in the Council placing a question on the 2020 ballot alongside a citizen-initiated question as to that very issue. This time around, though, the Commission proceeded by contemplating a range of issues of interest to individual commissioners as outlined in pages 2 and 3 of our report. From there, we narrowed the issues down to 6 that we would undertake to study for this 2-year cycle. I will not go into depth into the 3 issues that the Commission subsequently opted not to recommend, even provisionally, prior to holding our listening sessions to receive public input. Permit me, though, rather, to direct your attention to the report, though now I'd like to just briefly mention them in passing. Specifically, you'll see on page 8 of the report that the Commission did not consider further whether to amend the charter to provide for a process for recall of council members in the county executive. This was upon advice of council that the matter of recall was beyond the scope of our authority, inasmuch as it would be unconstitutional per an Attorney General's opinion. The Commission also held a spirited discussion as to whether to amend Section 109 to provide more flexibility to the council as to the manner in which legislative days can be designated. This occurred after Marlene Michelson requested that the Commission take up this matter in light of problems that have arisen in the past. See pages 8 to 10 that speak to a motion to address this, which failed by a 5-5 vote. The Commission also considered whether to amend Section 510 of the Charter to preclude the police union from bargaining over discipline, but came to a consensus to set aside any further consideration upon the General Assembly taking action during its 2021 session to address this topic when amending the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. But ultimately, after our listening sessions, the Commission is convened to consider anew the Charter amendments on which we had requested input. Today, the Commission respectfully requests the Council's consideration of a Charter amendment to clarify what occurs when 2 questions that appear on the ballot are both approved but are irreconcilable. As each of you are well aware, less than 2 years ago, we were faced with the very prospect of 2 diametrically opposed ballot questions being approved by the voters. 1, to elect all council members by district, and 1, to increase the council size to 11 by adding 2 district seats. We know that questions C and D did not both pass. But what if they had? The Maryland Attorney General, in an advisory opinion of July 18, 2002, addressing a similar situation in Baltimore City concerning charter amendments that conflicted, wrote that, quote, all the proposals that passed must fail, end quote, under such circumstances. With this in mind, the majority of the Commission has proposed at pages 15 to 16 of the report language that would redress such a situation. Similar to language that appears in the Anne Arundel Charter, only the amendment that receives the highest number of favorable votes would take effect and amend the Charter. We would note that the Attorney General, in his 2002 opinion, suggested that if such a Charter amendment were okayed by the voters, he believed the courts would look to it to resolve any conflict between or among approved amendments. The voters of Nevada in 1972 and Missouri in 1980 enacted constitutional amendments to similarly resolve conflicting amendments on their ballot. With the enactment of such a new charter amendment as we're proposing, it will have the effect of spurring both sides of opposing ballot questions to generate support, recognizing what the consequence would be were both ballot questions to be approved. This can only result in higher turnout at the polls, with the ballot question with a larger vote prevailing. The Commission also recommends to the Council 2 companion charter amendments pertaining to the residency requirements for the county executive and council members. Section 203 of the current charter provides for a 1-year residency for the county executive, and Section 102 has no such a residency requirement for council members. Commissioners were of the opinion that the 1-year requirement was too abbreviated a period to ensure the individual seeking to be county executive had the knowledge of and exposure to the county, its residents, its cultures, and its concerns. By way of comparison, Prince George's, Hartford, Baltimore County each has a 5-year requirement. Anne Arundel has a 4-year requirement, and Frederick County has a 2-year requirement. Ultimately, the Commission unanimously recommended increasing the residency requirement for the county executive to 3 years and to require that council members for the first time meet that same requirement. We considered but chose not to increase it to 5 years, so it would not overlap 2 election cycles and disqualify candidates unnecessarily and deny voters a choice. Lastly, the Commission considered but ultimately decided by a majority vote against amending either Section 206 or Section 118 of the Charter to add additional grounds for removal of a county executive or council member. After considering adding the grounds of serious misconduct in office and willful neglect of duty, the majority of the Commission is concerned that the language was fraught with difficulty, particularly in view of the fact that the proposed language was lacking in examples of what constituted, quote, misconduct, end quote, or, quote, neglect of duty, end quote. A minority report has been provided to you. As I conclude, I would be remiss if I did not express the appreciation of the commissioners and above all myself for the outstanding support we received from staff to the commission, in particular Christine Wellens and Ed Latner, who provided us with invaluable legal and legislative guidance as we navigated the shoals of some troubled waters. As we come to the near the end of our terms, we're very grateful to you and the council and staff for your support. Thank you. I'd be pleased to respond to any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Margolis. Ms. Wellens, I'm going to turn it over to you to just share with us your reflections on the Commission's recommendations and any recommendations you may have to piggyback off those.
Thank you, Mr. President. As Mr. Margolis said, the staff was in a facilitating, supportive role. To be frank, we didn't have any, staff recommendations because we weren't really charged with doing that. I'd be happy to look further if you would like a council staff recommendation. I certainly think that, as I mentioned before, the commission was extremely thorough, thoughtful, deliberative. They worked extremely hard, and certainly their recommendations are clearly presented, and I think would be very clearly presented to the voters should the council wish to move forward with placing any of the recommendations on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of context questions. So I totally understand the concern that there needs to be very clear and concise language before taking something as dramatic as the removal of a county executive or a member of the council. We have seen neighboring jurisdictions in which elected officials have engaged in illegal activity and actually been arrested for it. And so there is obviously a benchmark or threshold by which, reasonable people would wonder under what circumstances we would need to take such action. But there's obviously a lot of gray in that space. What is the current justification, if we know, for removal from office? And let's hope we never have to get there, but I'd just be curious as to what the current threshold is.
Well, the current threshold Thank you. Apologize. The current language in the charter, both for council members and for the executive, is for removal for a reason of physical or mental disability to perform the duties, and also invoking a provision of the state constitution, which is Section 2 of Article 15, which references felonies or misdemeanors related to public duties involving moral turpitude. So those are the only grounds at this time, and requires removal based upon 6 of the current 9 members, and it'll bump up to 7 of 11 as of this next year. So that's what the law currently requires.
And do you know, in your analysis in comparison to other local or regional jurisdictions, where Montgomery County lies? Was that part of your all's assessment?
As referenced in the report, when we first provisionally took a vote to change that provision, which ultimately the majority of the commission chose not to do so, we looked to Anne Arundel County and Baltimore City that had changed their charters to provide for other grounds. That included additional grounds, most recently Baltimore City because of what all of you know, their mayors had run into trouble. The other jurisdictions did not have other provisions beyond the ones you have in your charter.
Got it. I do think as a follow-up, Ms. Wellens, it would be good for us to conduct an assessment and evaluation, understandably seeing where the commission was not able to move forward, but it should be something we consider moving forward. Again, let's hope that we never find ourselves in that situation, but we should be prepared for the worst.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. President. Happy to do a deeper dive in terms of the staff analysis.
Great. Councilmember Friedson.
First of all, thank you so much to the Commission's work. I mean, clearly the thoughtfulness, the diligence has shown through the report. It's extremely thorough, and clearly the system is working, and the citizen review of the charter is working. So I really appreciate that. I want to express appreciation for all of the efforts that have been undertaken. It's a Herculean effort to think through all of these issues and the various aspects of them, and it shines through in your report. I appreciate the two recommendations. I think they're helpful. I appreciate the Council President's comments earlier. I also wanted to note for colleagues that now former County Attorney Mark Hansen sent us a thoughtful recommendation of an additional item to consider that I think we should add to consideration prior to making our decision related to the role of the county attorney. We've long had this question where the county attorney effectively serves at the pleasure of the county executive and yet has the responsibility to serve the county executive and the county council, serves both. And the question of independence for the county attorney is one that someone who served in the role as long as Mr. Hansen did, I think, can appreciate. And he had recommended what many other jurisdictions do and what is often viewed as a best practice for the firing of a county attorney to be only at the approval of the county council, the concurrence of the county council. It provides a level of protection, number one, but number two, it just provides, I think even more so, a level of understanding of the dual responsibility that a county attorney has. So I don't know that we're prepared to discuss it today, but I think we should add it to the follow-up as part of this, just like the removal from office that the council president had suggested. And I do think it's something that warrants further investigation, and it relates to a situation that many of us have raised of the role of the county attorney specifically, and how the county attorney interfaces with both the executive and the council. So I just wanted to note that and hope we can add it to our consideration as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Friedson. I've asked my colleague, Ms. Nadeau, to begin the research and evaluation of that recommendation or the potential amendment.
Thank you, and thanks to you. I noted the commission, but I wanted to thank you and Mr. Latner as well for your staffing of the commission, which, as noted, has been exceptional. Thank you.
Yeah, just very quickly, I concur with that thought. I think not ready for prime time. This came in rather late, but a reasonable explanation was given for consideration. I do think obviously we'll want to engage with the executive branch to have conversations with them just to think through all sides of this. But we will not be able to do this in time for this election cycle. But this will lay the groundwork for the next one after that, if this is something that we'd like to formally take up and request that the commission review as well. Council Vice President Glass.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Margulies, thank you very much for the presentation and for your work over the last number of years. It's been an exciting time on the Charter Review Commission. lots of interests, lots of ideas, and trying to distill them to what is most important, what is most needed, and appreciate this conversation and the discussion. But drilling down a little bit into two of the proposals that you recommended, one being the residency requirement and then the other about the competing charter amendments. I'm curious, knowing they're two separate issues, but what the impetus for either were. And I ask that open-ended question because it doesn't seem that, in my opinion, either have been problematic in the sense that we have incredibly smart residents here who do their homework, they do their due diligence, and they research issues and candidates before they vote on them. And 2 years ago, when there were various amendments being offered for the charter, the two that were supported by the council passed with the exact same margin of 62.5%. Voters had conversations, and they turned out in record numbers. It was a presidential election year, and that there have been candidates who have moved to Montgomery County, run for office, and the voters, again, did their due diligence. So I'm just curious why these issues surfaced to the top of the list and what we are trying to protect against. Turn your mic on, sir.
Thank you. Let's take first the issue of the irreconcilable charter amendments. The impetus for that one, we started discussing right away after the 2020 election, where we did have two irreconcilable ballot amendments. And what some feared didn't come to pass, but could have happened. When we raised the question with our counsel, Mr. Latner, he shared with us the opinion, which I have here. And obviously you can have your counsel research it, but I have here the opinion if you'd like.
That's the Attorney General opinion.
The Attorney General's opinion, which
I'm familiar
actually,
with that.
to the credit of the Attorney General, cited not only the opinion of the Baltimore city solicitor, but a previous opinion of the Attorney General himself. It wasn't an opinion, it was an advice letter of the Attorney General years earlier. So there were like three opinions there going back years. So our counsel, Mr. Latner, was very thorough in sharing it with us. And as I stated, or the report states, we had the benefit of the Anne Arundel Charter Amendment and the advice of the Attorney General to suggest there was a remedy to deal with. So we discussed it provisionally before we put it before the listening sessions, and then came back to address it as a proposed charter amendment. But we also had the benefit of knowing, and this was in the report, and I share with you now again, because I think it's important responding to your question, that the issue had come to the fore for our county once before, back in 1984. And so, if my arithmetic is correct, it's almost 40 years ago. And we could have been facing that very same issue then. Because at that time, our council, your council, was comprised of 7 at-large members, the original council. And at that time, by petition, 2 petitions, interestingly enough, you had competing charter amendments. Question D was to create a 5-district council with 2 at-large members. And another competing petition was to create an all-district council, 7 district seats. So both these competing petitions would have, if passed, had irreconcilable ballot amendments, just like in 2020. Well, what happened is neither passed. Both failed. Question D, the 5-district 2 at large, failed by a vote of 123,087 to 140,455 votes. 7-district question failed by 77,149 to 178,744 votes. So both questions failed. And so the issue that was raised 2 years ago and raised by the Attorney General's opinion in 2002, as I said, did not come to pass 40 years ago. So twice this county faced it. Now, interestingly enough, that was 1984. It was in 1986 that the charter was amended, as I think all of you know, to our current until a few months from now, to 5 districts and 4 at large. So because of that, our commission, in recommending to you, does believe it is a pertinent issue for you to consider, and obviously is in your hands to put it on the ballot this November if you decide. So we did think.
I appreciate the retrospective. Really interesting, especially when you think about the fact that this issue has come to the fore with regard to the makeup of the council back in the mid-'80s and back in 2020. And so clearly lots of community conversation, but in both instances, or at least in the time periods therein, we kept expanding, representing the diverse community that continues to live in Montgomery County. So progress continues to be made, and I appreciate the perspective in which you shared. Last question, I think, is just a bigger point. It's been shared with me by members of the public and, truth be told, members of the commission, that there should be a re-examination of the makeup of the commission. Do you have any thoughts on that? Who is appointed to the 11-member body, recognizing that no more than 6 members can be of one political party, which is not necessarily representative of the political makeup of the county?
The makeup of the commission.
Pardon me, sir?
You're saying the makeup of the commission itself.
So the commission is constrained to 11 members,
Sure.
no more than 6 of whom can be of one party, which is not fully representative of the county, but it has been shared to me by members of the commission and by members of the public that that should be re-examined itself.
Well, that's a good question, Mr. Vice President. I recognize the hybrid, if that's the right word, or the makeup as far as no more than 6 members of one political party is not unique to our commission. That a number of your boards and commissions are similarly structured, not necessarily by the charter, because we're one of the few that is spelled out in the charter, but by legislation, and that, again, it's not unique. That itself has not troubled me, although it has been a factor in our working relationship for the last 4 years.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I will. And I would be kidding myself if I didn't. I hate to look at things through a lens of partisan politics, not because I'm not partisan. I have been very active in Democratic politics over my life. But my one disappointment over the last 4 years has been the recurring division among our commissioners on policy issues and the difficulty in bridging our differences by consensus. I guess in some ways it's been dispiriting. I've tried in bridging those differences. I've offered myself compromising language, and I've taken pains to offer rationale for my thinking. But the split we've had between our Republican members and our Democratic members on the commission has been palpable, particularly since some of the matters I didn't see as being partisan, such as the irreconcilable ballot question. even the removal of officials engaged in serious misconduct. I personally didn't see it as a partisan issue. Now, I will say to you that even within our differences, everyone conducted themselves with respect to one another, and all meetings have been conducted with decorum. Honestly, I don't want you to think otherwise. I simply wish we didn't have so many split votes. If you read the minutes that are included in here, I'm not suggesting you had to. This is a thick document thanks to Ms. Wellens and her staff putting it together. But the minutes will show you the split. So when you make your appointments to future commissions, and I know many of you will be turning over, but maybe there's a way to look at that, and maybe changing the partisan nature or not having a Democrat-Republican split might be one way of doing that. I'm rambling. I don't know the right answer.
No,
it's just unfortunate that we've had this partisan split, and I tried to bridge it. I tried to reach consensus. Again, this is a fault on my part. I admit to it, as I'm the chair. And maybe Ms. Wellens will have some thoughts on it, not necessarily here in public, but in private. It's been unfortunate. I've tried, but I haven't succeeded.
Don't get yourself so down on
I'm
trying to wrangle cats on a commission on which you didn't select anybody, right?
That's correct.
Right. And I appreciate the candor in which you're having this conversation. I know I'm putting you on the spot by asking you a deep question about the board in which you chair, but clearly your leadership over the last 4 years, exemplified not only in the two documents, but the way in which you're having these conversations, despite the, using your word, dispiriting nature sometimes of the meetings and of the relationships, and you're striving to find compromise for the betterment of every Montgomery County resident, regardless of political party or partisan leanings, I think is very admirable. And I appreciate that. And clearly the proposals you brought to us will have more conversations. I will need to reflect on some of them. And this conversation about the makeup of this commission itself, I think might spark future conversations in which I look forward to engaging with you. So, Mr. Margulies, thank you on 4 years of leadership, and I appreciate this conversation.
Yeah, I am fascinated by this conversation, quite honestly, because this is an important one to have. I'm really glad the Council Vice President asked it. I had heard similar feedback, and it's a symptom of a broader issue and a decay in rhetoric that we're seeing across this country, and we're not immune to it here at the local level. There's been this tribalism that has developed, this us versus them, this winners and losers mentality that's bleeding into policies at all levels of government. And we know that there are some significant issues at the national level which will be coming down, what seems to be another contentious battle happening in our midterm election cycle that gets nastier by the day. And so, Mr. Margulies, you are not alone in trying to figure out, at the local level and at the most basic human level, how we communicate with each other when sometimes the disagreements get personal. So I really appreciate us having this conversation. It's a symptom of a broader issue. I see you want to say something, and then I've got Councilmember Katz and Navarro in the queue.
Just quickly, I clearly would identify with your comments at the national level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to suggest to you by any point that our different disagreements in the commission were of that ilk.
Fair.
At all. My colleagues in the commission were not what we perceive at the national level.
Mm-hmm.
As always, as I said earlier, been respectful with decorum. And while I wish I could have, or we could have, papered over our differences, put out of your mind that it was at the national level.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and that is important. But it also just highlights we got to hold the line here and keep that going. Use civility as our barometer moving forward at all levels. Councilmember Katz, followed by Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Margulies, for you and the commission for all your hard work. And you really, we know it's hard work, but you made it look easy, George. So that's one great thing to think about. I certainly understand and agree with the concern about the competing amendments. I think that even though we might not have had a problem, that doesn't mean we couldn't have a problem. So I think that's something obviously that we need to have a deeper discussion about and figure out what's the best way to do that. And I also agree for the county attorney, Mr. Hansen's suggestion on that we need to know, not for this one, but for future elections. I do have a question about the residency requirement. And one of my concerns is, and I understand how someone believes that if you just moved here, 2 days ago, that you might not be the expert on the topic that you're going to portray when you're running for office. But if someone moved away, I mean, if someone lived here for 50 years and moved away and came back 2 years later, how does that work? And what had you thought about that it has to be continuing? How does that work, George?
That's a good question, Mr. Katz. As we were discussing it, one of our members had suggested a requirement in which this 3 years would be calculated on a cumulative basis over a period of 5 years, acknowledging that one's business or familial needs may take an individual outside the county during a 5-year period, thinking that might be a better suggestion. The language we had recommended simply suggested that they had to reside in the county for 5 years. I'm trying to see if the language suggested that it had to be immediately preceding the language here. Let me look back here just to make sure I don't misstate. It does say for the, right now it's the language for the year preceding the election, and so we had recommended that it be changed for the 5 years preceding. So your point is well taken, Mr. Katz, and so it could have been changed to any time prior to the election, if that is the brother's desire of the council. And I understand your point. Clearly, our concern is the person had familiarity with the council, with the populace, with the culture of the council, of the county, as all of you sitting right now do. And past county executives, for that matter, have had. Our concern was the 1 year period right now in the charter for county executive being too little, and the fact that there is no period at all spelled out for council members. But thank you for raising that point.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your and all of the commission's hard work. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Margolis, thank you so much for your service. This, I think, will be my last time chiming in, and I am just so impressed by your leadership at the service of all the members of the Charter Commission, because no doubt many of these issues are so complex. And, just as Councilmember Katz just brought up a very important point, there's just so many different dimensions to many of these proposals. I guess my observation, it's not something that I necessarily expect an answer to right now, but I think it is something important to begin to look into, generally speaking, not just the Charter Commission, but also the council, present and future. So, you know, the way that the system has been put forth in terms of collecting signatures for what sometimes are very complicated proposals, obviously there could be very different ways in which these issues are presented. And I have often received feedback, especially from immigrant communities, that they didn't necessarily fully understand what was being proposed when they were being requested to sign on to these petitions because of the way things were worded. You know, many times these, the way these things are worded in these petitions are kind of in the weeds. So, you know, if you're like a policy geek, somebody that really follows closely the work of the council, maybe, you know, you can read between the lines. But just as it was alluded to have residency requirements, because you need to understand the culture of the county. It is a very complex county culturally. And so I do believe that although I think this process institutionally, legally has been established for a very important reason, I submit to all of you that perhaps when all of this was established, the county didn't look the way it does right now. The demographics of the county were not the same as they are right now. And so I think it is something broader to start to consider because I think it's an illusion to say that X and Y, you know, charter amendment on the ballot received these many votes and it's because all these residents were just so well informed and they totally understood, et cetera. That is the fallacy because at the end of the day, again, when we look at our population, we know, just as this council has worked so hard to authentically engage and empower community members of all walks of life with different languages, et cetera, to participate in the civic process, we know that this is a very complex process. And I think that in a way, it's a disservice to the residents to assume that truly when these petitions are presented, when folks go ahead and vote on these things, that every single person actually totally understood what was being presented. And again, you know, I'll just close with this. I mean, I remember hearing from a Latino parent who said, so-and-so was standing outside of a particular, you know, grocery store saying, you know, the council is going to raise your taxes to such a way that you're going to lose your home. And, you know, you can just imagine if you are, you know, an immigrant person who's worked so hard to save money to acquire a home, that if you hear something like that, absolutely you're going to sign on that paper. And that couldn't be further, you know, farthest from the truth. And so anyway, I think it is another element that I think it is important to begin to think through how these processes authentically reflect the true will of the residents versus just the will of the residents who actually are very much tuned into these very complex issues. So don't know if you have any reactions to that, but I just feel very strongly that it's something that we must address.
I thank Ms. Navarro for her thoughts. I really appreciate that. I don't have any comment. But can I go back to something, Mr. Katz's recommendation, now that I've had a chance to look at the language again? The language here would change it to 3 years preceding the election. Had it said 3 years immediately preceding the election, then Mr. Katz's point would be well taken. But it just says 3 years preceding the election. So I think his concern is taken care of. If the person had lived in the county 3 years, 15 years ago, then I think the language is still valid because it doesn't say immediately preceding the election. So I'm sanguine about it.
Thank you, Mr. Margulies, for that clarification. That's helpful.
I would like to just, Mr. President, just like to add something since Mr. Margulies doesn't have any thoughts on my observations. If Ms. Wellens could begin to look into what could be some scenarios in which the council, obviously not for this particular cycle, but I think moving forward could begin to examine that particular issue, because to me it is central to our democracy. It is central to authentic participation in a real representational democracy. And so I do think that it behooves us as a council to just start thinking and pondering around these issues and then seeing whether there perhaps could be an actual proposal for the next particular cycle in terms of what would be some scenarios, some remedies to ensure that a diverse county like ours, linguistically and culturally, is actually able to fully participate in these processes. What are their best practices around the country? What is it that we can do? Because again, if not, I really do believe that this is a major disservice to the residents of this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Navarro. Mr. Margulies' mic was on, but he validated your comment and agreed with you in principle. And you read my mind. I was going to make a similar recommendation, because I've seen this firsthand as well with some of these ballot measures and the threshold being what it is. That is confusing, and that doesn't take into account our population today, not presented in a manner in which is easy to digest for anybody, let alone somebody who speaks English as a second language, or there's a cultural aspect of this too. When you think about the governments from which a lot of our residents come from, there's just a very diverse set of experiences and lenses from which people view some of these particular ballot measures. And I'll say this too, we also have to pull the thread a little bit here, because as we look at some of these decisions, we should be evaluating their impact overall on government structures moving forward. I think that's something that we should be taking into account as well. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Jim, for the work of you and the commission. I know it's not easy. I've watched many of those sessions, and to your point of going back and forth, it's a tough job. On these two amendments, the recommendations, I appreciate the back and forth with Council Vice President Glass on the contradictory charter amendment. I think there's some interesting considerations there to be weighed. I think the residency one is a slam dunk. That makes sense to me. It brings us in line, so I'm glad you all recommended that. I do want to ask, and it's related to the point that was just made by Councilmembers Navarro and Council President Albernaz. You know, there's been a lot of debate over the years of whether referendum are effective, right? Whether it's good to put something, a yes or no question to the public, even if you try to do it as clearly as possible, and whether that binary choice yields, you know, you're going to get the input you want. I think there are arguments for and against. I think on balance, it does give some direct power to voters, which is a good thing. But to the points that were made, how it's described, how the information is disseminated, you know, who's funding the awareness of what's available. These are all things that I've noticed both as a member of the council and even just as a regular resident, citizen. The people who are most tuned in and interested have the money to spend either way. And you have a lot of people who don't understand what's going on. And I would want you to also look into, in addition to the comments that were made, what can we do to minimize that? We're not going to eliminate it, right? The Supreme Court's been clear on what's speech and what's not, but how can we counterbalance it in some way as the county to make sure people understand what these things actually mean and what they're voting for, other than the plain text of the language? And there has been some back and forth on the council of whether can the council engage, how can the council engage, and we've gotten opinions on how we can advocate, but I think the clarity and the messaging and the resources behind that are a really important part of this, because you know, you look at, you know, on one extreme you have the California example where there's so many things, you know, people just, you know, and it's whoever has the most money to throw at it. In some cases, that's what passes. So we're not in that situation, thankfully, but you know, we have our own version of that issue. So I want to give you an opportunity to comment on that, but also just say I think that's something, as we look at this larger issue of who's participating, a key part of that is how we get the word out, how we explain it, what language it's in, all those things. And so just want to allow you to comment if you have a comment.
As the outgoing chairman, I'm not sure if I'm the best person to, but it is something which I'm making notes on. And the commission, although our term ends in December, we're going to reconvene in September with the purpose of, for lack of a better term, tee up issues that we might throw to the next commission. And these are things worthy of doing just that. Interesting enough, it wasn't until 1986 that the county council began naming each ballot title. In other words, before 1986, questions put in the ballot didn't have a title.
Right.
In 1986, you started doing that, and of course continued doing so. And what that title is to your questions is significant. You know that. It informs the voter, but it also persuades the voter, both to your questions and to the petitioner's question. So I think endemic to one of your questions was just that. As to how, and I realize there's short form titles and then long form titles. And of course, those who put out the guides give more. But I think that is part of your question, as well as the funding behind it and a lot of other things. So I think, yes, the commission could take that up as part of it. And so I will definitely suggest that, Mr. Juanda.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. So, Ms. Wellens, what do we need to do here? I'm sorry, my fault. Council Vice President Glass has to chime in. I forgot.
I'll be real brief, but I appreciate the conversations that Councilmember Navarro and Juando elevated with regard to citizen participation and intention and understanding. And it is because of that I've engaged a number of our state lawmakers in the Senate and the House to take a look at the Maryland Constitution, which sets the framework for charter amendments to get on the ballot. And it is the Maryland Constitution that says anything, policies can get, a petition can get on the ballot if it has been signed by 20% of registered voters or 10,000 signatures, or gained 10,000 signatures. In Montgomery County, where we have 1.1 million people, having 10,000 residents sign a petition is akin to having less than 1% of residents getting something on the ballot. And as we talk about participatory democracy and referendum, I'm not sure that having less than 1% of residents getting something on the ballot is what the Maryland framers or lawmakers before us intended. And I think as we continue to work towards a modern, efficient, functioning democracy here, I think this is something that we need to take up. And I am working with folks in Annapolis to help update and modernize so that fewer than 1% of our residents don't necessarily dictate what happens here in Montgomery County as we strive to expand democracy and participation. Mr. Margulies, looks like you want to comment.
No. That point is something we've had a brief conversation over the years about, and I think it's a valid observation on your part.
I appreciate that. I look forward to working with you on it.
One other point that, going back to Ms. Navarro's comments, that I just wanted to make as a thread going through a lot of your comments. I want to thank the council. If I'm correct, the last 3 appointments to the commission, all to fill vacancies over the last few years, all came from the international community. All of them, each of them. of our vacancies. So I want to thank you for that, because that increased the diversity on our commission.
I go back.
Thanks. Before asking you what our formal next step is, Ms. Wellens, I would love to follow up, because there are, in addition to the items enumerated by my colleagues right now, pulling the thread I mentioned earlier, thinking through some of the ramifications of previous ballot measures. There's going to be significant turnover on future councils, in part because of term limits and for other reasons as well. And the continuity of service is going to be really important. I have so appreciated our central staff and the critical role that they play in ensuring that continuity of service. But as council president this year, I have been reflecting a lot on the makeup of this body in light of the inevitable changes that will happen for future councils. And I do think it's something that we need to look at deliberately and thoughtfully. You know, the role of the council president. Should it be circulated every year, or should this be an elected position as it is in the District of Columbia? There are real serious questions that we need to ask ourselves, given that continuity and the change in makeup, because we just have to set up future councils for success, and that is not something we can take for granted. That being said, Ms. Wellens, what do we need to do right now in light of these recommendations from the Commission?
Thank you, Mr. President. So today was, of course, the opportunity for you to hear the presentation of the report and to ask some initial questions. Council staff will work closely with the clerk in order to schedule the next steps of, potential work sessions, all the necessary public hearings and votes, potentially, if the council wishes to move forward with placing the commissions or any other potential charter amendments to the voters on the ballot. And then we also, just for everybody's frame of reference, if there are any voter-initiated petitions, those would be coming in right at the end of July. If there are any, that would necessitate the council potentially meeting at the beginning of August in order to finalize the language on the ballots.
Got it. Okay. Well, then this was just a briefing. So thank you so much, Mr. Margulies. We appreciate your leadership, sir, in so many different ways. And with that, we now move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is an update on Thrive Montgomery 2050. All the folks who are here to discuss that important issue, please come forward to the dais. I'm going to turn it over to the chair of our Planning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee, Chairman Reamer, to make some opening comments.
Great. All right. Well, today we are going to get a bit of a briefing about the process that we are embarking on to conduct additional analysis and engagement around racial equity and social justice issues. And we also have a question to work our way through, which hopefully isn't a challenging one, about the content of the document and the extent to which we're going to revise it. So Pam has some framing for us, but we'll get to that as we get to it in the packet. But I don't think this is going to be a heavy lift in any sense, and I think there's an easy path here forward for us. And the packet before us lays out the timeline, so we can conduct our work and meet our goal to pass this before the deadline, which is at the end of October. So we'll be very busy, and it's important for us to figure out how we're going to restructure content and prepare new content so that we can provide it to our new partners who are going to be working with us to do engagement. We want to be sure that any new thoughts and ideas are part of the process that they'll be leading us through. So with that said, I want to just also make some comment here about housing issues, just in general, because they've come up a lot, and there's been some very misleading comments made by our county executive about housing and Thrive. really just spreading misinformation about housing issues in Thrive. So I know this is sort of separate from the conversation we'll have here in a moment, but I really want to recommend that everybody take a close look at what is in Thrive. And I've heard our county executive say things like, Thrive says nothing about affordable housing. There is a very deep and thorough chapter about housing and affordable housing and housing affordability. And it talks at length about the growing housing deficit that we have in the county and how that squeezes populations that are vulnerable in Montgomery County. It creates homelessness and displacement and leads to a workforce that can't gain a foothold in Montgomery County and affects populations differently and has significant disproportionate impact on people of color and families of color. That's all in Thrive. It's really the emphasis, it's the point of the chapter about housing, is that a housing policy that doesn't support adequate production of housing at every price point produces really difficult outcomes for the community. And Thrive calls for a range of solutions around different kinds of housing types. It talks about things like, I'm just going to read from the draft, the high cost and limited variety of available housing exacerbate inequality and segregation by race and class. Home prices vary widely in different parts of the county, closely tracking the racial and economic characteristics of neighborhoods, with predominantly white residents living in more expensive neighborhoods with better access to jobs, schools, and transportation options than the African American or Latino residents of less expensive neighborhoods. These inequities reinforce the legacy of racism and both de facto and de jure desegregation, and continue to influence the geographic distribution of opportunities and resources, leading to inequitable outcomes in educational attainment, economic opportunity, and public health. Those are very strong statements. Thrive, I think, gets right to the heart of the legacy of exclusionary zoning and of housing policies that perpetuate social disparities. So it also talks about a lot of solutions. Thrive focuses in on expanding opportunities to increase residential density, especially along major corridors and in locations where additional housing can assist in the development of complete communities. It talks about increasing the number of income-restricted affordable housing units. Those are units that are set aside for applicants who will have a demonstrated lower income. That's what we think of as traditionally affordable housing, although it's a bigger concept. It talks about housing first, which is one of our key policies to tackle homelessness, developing strategies to build deeply affordable housing, provide permanent supportive housing. That's housing that is part of a social service pathway with supplementary supporting services to help people leave homelessness. It talks about supporting the building code to reduce costs, to accommodate innovative construction methods, things that make it cheaper to build housing so housing will be more affordable. It talks about prioritizing use of public land. This council recently had a rather contentious argument about whether we were going to support more housing at the Chevy Chase Library site. Here we have in Thrive, prioritize use of public land for co-location of housing and other uses. So these are just some. I could go on at length, but the statement that Thrive doesn't have a strong housing policy agenda is misinformation, pure and simple, and of course it is spread throughout the community. It's not to say Thrive can't be improved, and it can and it will, and we're going to work together to make sure that it is. But Thrive has a very powerful argument about how we can promote housing equity and housing opportunities. Now, having said that, I'm going to pass it to Pam, and she'll introduce our new partners. We can get into the conversation, and then we'll work our way through, and then we'll come back to talk a bit about the structure of the document.
Let me just make a couple of comments before we do that really quick. So thank you, Chairman Reamer. Just to level set and to remind everyone why we are here and where we are in the process, just from a very high level, and then I will turn it over to Pam to introduce our really important panelists this morning. So one of the criticisms and concerns that we heard from numerous residents was that they were just waking up to Thrive. We're not engaged in the discussion and conversation, and I do give a lot of credit to our park and planning team for their attempts to reach out to the community, but it wasn't their fault that this was initiated in the midst of a pandemic when there was understandably a lot going on. So in addition to the 9 sessions that we had in committee to discuss this very issue, and I really want to once again credit the committee for doing a lot of heavy lifting with Pam's help, we also then had multiple sessions with the public to be able to hear from them, both formally through the normal process by which we use, but we added a partnership with our regional service center directors, all 5 of them, and solicited additional feedback through that process. And in that process, there was a recommendation made that there needed to be a deeper dive on the racial equity analysis. And I really want to once again thank Dr. Bonner-Tompkins for her diligence and recommendations, which have brought to bear the consultants that we will hear from in just a moment. And as I have stated publicly before, the council's intention is to move forward with passing Thrive, but we wanted to help ensure that we do have those diverse sets of voices heard. And the other important decision point today and this morning will be what additional chapters we look at and ask that our central staff working with the park and planning team help develop so that we can vote on a final document. So with that as context, I now turn it over to Ms. Dunn to fill in any of the holes I may have missed and add anything to that.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I don't think there are any holes there. We have great opening remarks, and it does set the stage. You last met on March 1st about this. It was where the council gave direction to seek consultant assistance on, one, a review of the Fed committee draft of Thrive Montgomery 2050, reaching out to targeted community members and getting feedback on those policies and recommendations in the plan, not just the plan as a whole, but doing more of a deep dive into the policies and the recommendations. So we have gone through that process. I'm excited we get to introduce you to the consultant that has been awarded this contract, who is amazing, and I'm really excited that we get to work with them and work with planning staff with them this summer. There is a time frame in the staff report about that, but I don't want to take up any more of their time. They're here this morning. Some of them are with us virtually. And with that, I'm just going to turn it over to them, let them give you an overview of their work in general and each member of their team. And then once you are done with any questions of the consultant team, we'll move on to the rest of the packet.
Good morning. Thank you for having us today. I'm Charnel Hicks, the president of CH Planning and Inspire Green. We are active on planning and engagement assignments throughout the region with offices, with offices in the District of Columbia, the City of Philadelphia, Fort Lauderdale, and we're also active in Houston and other parts of the country as well. Very happy to be here. With that, I'd like to allow the members of my firm and the team to introduce ourselves. Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Good morning. Very happy to be here. My name is Jordan Exantus. I'll be serving as project manager for this effort. Just to give you a brief background about who I am. I'm a 15-year planning professional, graduate from Cornell University, Urban Regional Studies program, and University of Memphis City and Regional Planning program. Spent my whole career in planning. I've worked in New York City. I was the planner for Indian reservation in northern Minnesota called Red Lake Nation. I worked in Memphis, Tennessee as a part of the development district and worked on one of the choice neighborhood projects in that city, looking at urban redevelopment in the downtown area and the last public housing project in that city. And for the past 8 years roughly, I served Prince George's County prior to coming to Inspire Green, where I worked the central part of the county on transit-oriented development, neighborhood conservation, and some of the planning for Largo Town Center and the development of the Capital Regional Medical Center. And then also served with Parks and Rec as the lead park planner for the northern portion of Prince George's County. I have a strong commitment to racial equity and social justice, so I just want to say to this group, I really appreciate being here. Most of my career, this conversation has been kind of on the fringes of our work, and I'm really, really happy that I'm able to work on a project where this is the focus of the effort. For people like me, this is really a dream come true. I realize it's kind of late in the process, and we'd like it to be integrated from the beginning, but you know, as the proverbial saying goes, better late than never, and we really hope to get as much done in the next few months as possible to really uncover you know, what the issues are. We've heard a lot of different perspectives on this project, and you know, how it's been conducted and what's in it, but I think you know, working together we can really come up with something great and improve what's there, and you know, get more voices from the underrepresented communities as part of this process.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Karen Armendariz. I'm a Transportation and Climate Resilience Planner at Inspire Green. I've been here in the region working as a planner for the past 4 years, previously with WMCOG as a transportation planner, working with the Transportation Planning Board as well. And now I'm here working primarily in transportation planning and some climate resilience work. I focus on incorporating racial equity considerations into our technical work, but also I do a lot of work with engagement, primarily doing qualitative research and incorporating that into planning analysis and processes.
I'm Theo Brown. I'm a principal in Public Engagement Associates, which is a Maryland-based firm that works to engage people in issues that matter in their lives. We've been doing this for 8 years. We did it with another organization called America Speaks for 12 years before that, and have done a lot of work throughout this region engaging folks. I'm a 30-year resident of the Long Branch neighborhood in Silver Spring, and so I'm also very familiar with some of the issues here that you're talking about, and some of the changes in the community are right there in my neighborhood that I'm very familiar with, in the schools, et cetera. I've spent my life, now very much longer than I'd like to admit in terms of number of years, working with organizations that seek to get in the voices of people who've been ignored or underrepresented in the political process. And we at Public Engagement Associates continue that work, and we've worked with Inspire Green before and on a couple of very successful projects, and glad to work with them again. And I have a couple of colleagues, I think, joining us also from Zoom. Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, hello everybody. Steve Brigham, Public Engagement Associates, been working with Theo and Kim for the last 20 years, the last 8 mostly on projects in the local area, including in Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Howard County. Know the region well. I've been living in the region for 34 years. Racial equity is near and dear to me, both at a personal and professional level. And delighted to be a part of this project to bring more of those important voices into the mix here.
And good morning. My name is Kim Sasko, and I'm also a principal of Public Engagement Associates, and have worked with Steve and Theo for close to 20 years on a wide range of issues, not only in this metropolitan area, but across the country on different public engagement issues that affect the lives of residents, citizens, and people who are greatly impacted by public policy decisions. Public Engagement Associates is a DBA, a Special Projects LLC. We are a SBE, MBE in the state of Maryland. And during the pandemic, we worked on a lot of outreach efforts. So we know what that struggle was like to try to get people to focus on issues when they were struggling with just some real life challenging issues. And so as we come out of the pandemic, we're really looking at combining some of the new strategies we've had to develop to reach people, as well as some of our well tried out strategies to engage the public on Thrive 2050. So thank you for allowing us to be a part of this process.
So with that is the team. I don't know if you have any questions for them. What I will say is that, we've had some pre-meetings already. The timeline that is in the staff report indicates that they have deliverables that will come back to us in early September, so that this body can take up this work. They were charged with providing a report. The report will provide what that comprehensive outreach strategy plan is, what the results of that outreach engagement is. It will provide recommendations on the Fed committee draft of Thrive 2050, and it will be providing a chapter on racial equity and social justice. And we will work with them all summer. We'll also involve the planning department because, again, part of what the council body suggested and makes the most sense for efficiency is for them to leverage what has already been done in outreach and then take that forward to achieve the goals of what the council's laid before us. So I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Yes, we've got Councilmember Jawando, followed by Councilmember Navarro, and I had my own questions, but I'll yield, and then Councilmember Friedson after Councilmember Navarro. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, and good morning. Good to see everybody. Thanks for attending in person and virtually, and way to go, Long Branch. That's where I grew up too. I know Tom probably say the same thing. So you spoke to this a little bit, Ms. Dunn, just at the end there, leveraging what's already been done. Right, so you all have been provided or will be provided the work that planning did. My office did additional work as far as outreaching to certain communities, particularly the African American community. So you'll have all that. That's the part of the process here in the over the summer, first month or so. And I'm assuming you'll do some interview. Well, I don't want to assume. Tell me what you're going to do in that first kind of gathering stage. And will you be speaking with council members and other interested parties to help hone in and focus how you gather that information? Whoever's most appropriate to answer that.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. I think, as you said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's been a lot of great work that's taken place to kind of get the plan to where it is. We also understand that the work of mobilizing the communities that we're seeking to engage is really difficult. And, with the added, burden of the pandemic, it may have, prevented, the most structurally disadvantaged folks from really being involved in this process. And then also understanding that capacity building is also a piece of that, right? So we heard that in the previous conversation we're listening, people's capacity to understand. It really takes time to get meaningful input. Our approach, given the compressed timeline, is to really work off of the networks that exist. We know that there's analysis that we can do to identify where these people live and to understand who's doing the work in those areas of serving those populations that may understand the issues and the needs. Our engagement approach has several tiers. One, we'd like to convene kind of an advisory group. Folks who play those roles in community and can kind of, provide us with guidance into how to get our messaging out, how to structure conversations, and, how to reach people that we may be having trouble reaching. We intend to have a series of focus group conversations when we're able to kind of identify.
Not to cut you off, but who's leading that? Is that in partnership? Is that co-led between public advocacy? Just explain that a little bit.
So I'll back up. The reason we wanted Public Engagement Associates on our team is, as was stated, they have a lot of experience working in the county and kind of facilitating these types of conversations. I think we have a lot of public engagement experience. We'd also bring kind of the planning component into it. But I think in terms of, having an effective effort, we need to hit the ground running, and we need to be doing a lot of activities concurrently. Yeah. So, that's why you see 3 folks from their team. There's additional ones that aren't here who will be involved. So we have a robust group of people, so we're capable of running multiple meetings within the same week. And, our role, on the Inspire Green side is to really help design, what is talked about in those conversations to make sure that we're getting our charge, which is pertinent feedback on the plan recommendations. So really trying to understand how do we distill these ideas in a way that people can understand and that we can get meaningful input, in those conversations.
Yes, that's helpful. And I think, one of the things I've talked about a lot, and I think others have expressed, is I know it's a compressed timeline. We've got the pandemic, we've got the summer, layer on all the things that will make it challenging. But we have to institutionalize this going forward in everything we do.
Right.
And so to the extent that you can just have that in your mind as a set of best practices from as you're doing this, of things we can do either in the planning stages or at the council or combined to because we don't want to just do this one time and, you know, throw it away, so to speak. And I know you're not, but we have to institutionalize it, get the networks in place. I'm glad to hear you say work through existing community groups. There's a lot of community groups that have been doing outreach on Thrive, and they're on their own, you know, and we want to make sure we're tapping into those networks. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate also your focus on, you know, communities that have not, are harder to reach and have not gotten the information, and that you need to merge the messaging and so that they understand what you're asking, right? That was the part of the challenge we had. Like, well, what is, you know, you have to get, what is Thrive? What is a general plan?
Right.
And how can I interact with it in a meaningful way? And that was going to be my second question to you. If you could just give an example of, you know, because I'll just admit, for when we were doing our outreach, trying to condense and make concise, get meaningful input back from folks who are like coming from a place where they don't understand planning.
Right.
That's always a challenge. And so, not that we're going to, you know, solve everything in one summer, but if you have thoughts on how you're going to do that.
Yeah, I think it's your points are well made, and it's a challenge, right? I think the important thing about, and there's kind of two parts of this. Engagement in and of itself is a critical piece of the planning process, right? And I think, you know, the general plan kind of gives broad sweeping guidance and recommendations on how planning should be done going forward. But I think there's a lot that can be said about how the process itself is designed, right? In terms of how you engage, who you engage, and the amount of power that you delegate in terms of making decisions about what goes into the plan. You know, planning in and of itself is in a field of advocacy, right? It was designed and established to give voice to people, to help establish a vision for their communities, right? And I think the danger that we get into as practitioners a lot of times is, you know, we have this fancy education that teaches us what the best practices are. The community may not understand it, so we say, well, we know what the issues are, we're going to kind of provide the prescriptions. But I think sometimes that creates unintended consequences, right? And so for me, what I've seen throughout my career is a lot of times when engaging with communities that may not have the language of planning, you know, people are frustrated, people are disruptive, they say all kind of things, and you know, if you're not prepared for that, it can throw you off, and it can kind of create an adversarial you know, relationship. And so, like, you know, for me, the approach to planning in these contexts is always showing deference to people and respect, and just understanding that their frustrations are really the most important part of the process. The complaints that people have about the things that are not working for them is the most important part of this, because you, at the end of the day, you need to understand, you know, their life and what makes it difficult. So they may not understand what transit-oriented development means, but they understand the difficulty that they have getting to work. They understand the difficulty they have finding a job, finding childcare, and all the other tangential pieces that planning influences without them really understanding how, right? And so I think really, you know, for me, working with these folks is about understanding their needs and issues, and then beginning to have the conversation about how planning prescriptions can address them, and then maybe getting some kind of feedback on, you know, what they think might work best for them.
I appreciate it. And I know it's truncated, but you said, as you've said, but you feel you have enough time based on previous experience to get meaningful input under the timeline that you've laid out?
Yeah, it feels like a bit of a trick question, but I think that we're going to definitely, have as robust of a process as we can. I think it would always be great to have more time, and summer is difficult because people have a lot going on, but we're going to do as much as we can to kind of get the word out, to entice people to participate, and really, leveraging those networks to make sure that maybe if we're not able to talk to everyone, we're talking to the key people who work in those communities that can kind of speak to the issues that they're facing, the things that they're seeing. I think in an ideal world, this process would go on and on, but I think the benefit that we do have is that the general plan is not the end game, right?
Right.
I think we can create recommendations that speak to future planning when you go out and do your sector plans, when you go out and do your minor master plans.
Right.
What might you do in those processes to learn from what we've outlined in this process so that going forward, when you plan on a more local level, you're bringing some of these ideas into the process to make sure that those subsequent planning efforts are more equitable and do emphasize justice in the way that we'd like to see going forward.
Well, that's absolutely my hope, and not only hope, but expectation of something that comes out of this, that we can do that and use that information. I appreciate it, and I look forward to engaging with you and helping you do what you're trying to do as far as giving input and guidance and looking at the plan, and so really appreciate it. And thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro, followed by Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and it's great to meet all of you virtually. So just a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of presenting actually to COG about some of the practical applications of the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act. And I actually included this particular piece because obviously when I authored that legislation and then engaged in that year-long process of engagement with the community that we all knew, of course, could have been a lot longer. There's always a need for it to be longer. The idea was to continually improve on how this particular law is actually applied. And so I'm, number one, just feel really great right now to hear this exchange, because if it had not been for that particular law and the requirement of an impact statement that Dr. Bonner Tompkins was able to at least put forth, we wouldn't be here. And for me, I think what's going to be super important, and it was alluded to just in this exchange, would be to then come up within the report with some of the lessons learned regarding process going forward. Because there's no doubt that we may not be able to have this thorough engagement, with an outside firm for every single piece of legislation or land use decision. But something as important as the general plan, obviously, it is definitely, it should be a requirement that we would engage with a firm like this from the very beginning. And I think that, as we're learning how to make this particular law really a living process that works towards this issue of closing, gaps and addressing disparities and eliminating them eventually. I think this is a good lesson because, number one, we've heard a lot in the community. There's a lot of skepticism, right? There's this belief in some spaces that we're just trying to delay this because we really don't want to adopt this plan, et cetera. And it is unfortunate because in reality, as we had a discussion during the Charter Review Commission, in reality, something as critical as this plan that has an impact on every single resident of the county, more than anything, we have got to be mindful of ensuring that communities who are no longer niche communities, as the gentleman was talking about Long Branch, and I had flashbacks of when I started doing community work 30 years ago as well in Long Branch. There was an interesting story. There was the Unity Festival, the Long Branch Unity Festival, and I was running this organization. We put out some bilingual flyers because we were going to celebrate the Day of the Child, Día del Niño, and I actually was threatened. I had to file a police report because there was a gentleman who threatened me because we put out bilingual flyers. And he claimed that we were dividing the community and threatened me with physical harm. And this was 30 years ago, in the epicenter of an extraordinarily diverse community. And so the community in Montgomery County hasn't just changed overnight. This has been happening now for decades and decades, really, most specifically since the 80s with the influx of Central American population. So my point is that, to me, this is so exciting because even though it's not perfect, right, I wish we had all had the awareness of engaging early on in the process. I do think that the council can learn a lot from this particular report, and I hope that in your report you can incorporate some recommendations for future processes, engagements, and things of that nature. I'm also glad to hear that you're going to build upon what has been done already, because Park and Planning did do really good work. And I think there is a lot to build from there. But I'll close with this, my own experience as someone who joined the council and began to represent the epicenter of the Latino community, Wheaton. And I decided to take part of my budget to build from scratch an engagement program in the Latino community. And that came out from engagement that I had with parents at MCPS who would always start talking about education and then start to veer off into transportation, land use, healthcare, access to housing and all of those things, right? And it just dawned on me that we need to build the civic education base of our communities. And so important, that point that was just made about how do you talk about land use? You don't come in and talk about, hey, this is the general plan and it's going to determine, you talk about, hey, what's working in your community? What are some of the challenges that you see and some opportunities? And people have a lot to say. Yeah. And so, again, I appreciate and I'm very impressed with what I have heard in terms of your approach and everybody that is here. And but I do hope that this report includes some, possible recommendations for this legislative body as we engage in executing and applying Racial Equity and Social Justice Act going forward in a way that is with fidelity. So no challenge here for all of you. You're breaking ground, definitely breaking ground with something that I know will become commonplace as we go forward. So just observations, and I look forward to also working with you very closely as well. In any way that you need any sort of input, be glad to share with you some of that feedback as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson, followed by Councilmember Katz.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thanks for being here. Thanks for responding to the solicitation, and thanks for the partnership that you have built. I'm very encouraged. There's some concerns about what type of land use experience there was going to be for an organization that was going to do this work. Clearly, you have that. There was concern about what type of familiarity there was going to be with the community and the county and the communities within the county, which is the whole point and purpose of this work. And clearly, you have that both personally and professionally. So I'm encouraged by this group and this partnership that you have put together in order to do this really important work. I'm excited to see what it is that you do, and I'll echo colleagues. I think we need not only the work that we're doing here, but also the recommendations for moving forward, because the challenge and the frustration a lot of people have, we originally got this document 14 and a half months ago by my count. And we're always going to be in a situation where at the end of a process, we could say, when it comes to engaging community, that we have historically not done as well as we should, and we will never do as well as we need to. We always have to be better than what we were. We can always say it wasn't good enough. And so the question is, at what point is that enough for us to slow a process down to continue the outreach and the engagement? And that's a harder question to answer, I think, than I'm capable at this point. But I think we need to institutionalize the process that we heard from other colleagues. And I think it's most important that we come up with a process with your expertise that's reasonable, that's actionable, and that's repeatable. Because I'm afraid if we set the expectation here that every planning item and decision that we have before us, we're going to take 18 months or longer to complete, or that we're going to hire highly skilled and costly consultants to carry out, that we're not going to be able to do the work that we're required to do. And so finding that balance and utilizing your background and best practices from other jurisdictions to understand where we come up with that, that balance, I think is going to be critical. Understanding that we always need to do better, we always need to push ourselves to dig deeper into the communities that we serve, and that those who have historically been underrepresented, we have to be even more intentional about engaging them in the process and making sure that it's relatable. I appreciate the comments you made earlier about the difference between the textbook planning and how people actually understand the decisions in their lives. It's not just planning, it's everything that we do. And I think a lot about Vision Zero. If you ask an ordinary person on the street in any community, what do you think of Vision Zero? They'd look at you like they have no idea what you're talking about. But if you said, what do you think about your child being able to get to school safely, being able to wait at their bus stop without being afraid that they're going to get struck by a car, or be able to utilize a sidewalk with a stroller? They would say, of course, that's critical work. What are you doing about it? But the language that we use, the way that we approach these issues is critical, and your help in moving us forward is going to be important. I appreciate the commitment of building on the work that's already been done. There's been a lot of work that has been done up to this point. I think it's important to acknowledge that and for us not to reinvent the wheel, so I'm glad that that was raised a number of times. I also want to note the organizations that have been doing this work, and hope that you can partner with them, not only to learn what they've done, but to have them help you continue the work that you are looking to do. AIM, Action in Montgomery, comes to mind. It's a faith-based organization, has roots all over the community. I think faith organizations are a great opportunity to reach deeply as a trusted intermediary for government. Not everybody wants to go meet with a consultant, frankly, and certainly not everybody wants to go meet with a government, organized effort, but they're much more likely, perhaps, to go to a meeting at their place of worship that they go to every Saturday or Sunday or maybe every day of the week. So just wanted to note that and hope that you'll work on that. Of course, there's other organizations as well, but they've, in particular, done a lot of work all over the county that I wanted to note. There's kind of two aspects of today's meetings. This is perhaps for council staff. One is to introduce you all and ask questions of you all, which I appreciate. And the other is to talk about the process for moving forward. So I'm just wondering, are we going to get to that next, or should I ask a few questions about that now? And perhaps that's for council staff or the council president. I don't want to be out of order here.
We've got two people in the queue. Councilmember Novato would like to be back in the queue. Why don't we do that first, and then we'll go back to asking those questions regarding that aspect of it. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I'll get back in the queue for questions regarding moving forward. Or you want me to ask them now? About chapters and date, time? Okay, so sounds good. So one is related to the report. So the dates are broad right now, and I think the dates have to be much more specific. And so that's true of the consultant report. I've been involved in a lot of solicitations in my day. I'm not used to a general time frame for a report. Normally it's the report is due on or before X date. So I'm just curious, early September is a broad timeline. Do we have a specific date that we expect?
The solicitation had a September 1st deadline for the contract. The reason the report said early September is that the contract can be extended through the end of October, which is the goal for this council to adopt the plan. And the reason it can be extended during that time frame is really to assist in work sessions here at the council. And so the original deadline being September 1st is to indicate that's when we need the deliverables. We want the report done on the engagement and the draft chapter for consideration. The reason the report said early September is if in fact while the consultant group is doing this outreach and finds that they need one more week of critical work on report writing, and the draft of the report and recommendations is done September 7th, but before this council returns from recess, that is still appropriate if they've gotten the extension. So I didn't want to provide the community with an expectation that on an exact date something will be here in case it slides by 1 week or 10 days. But the goal being, by the time the council comes back from recess on September 13th, that work is in-house, it is done, and we will start with the work sessions with this council body. The council then, as the report says, has 6 work sessions between that date and when they should be adopting the plan. And so 6 seems to be a lot of council sessions in which I don't anticipate the council will need 6 work sessions on the Thrive plan to review. But I wanted to give that framework of, you have 6 sessions, and the deadline, the last council session is October 25th, I believe, before the October 31st deadline.
I appreciate that. My old lacrosse coach used to say, aim small, miss small. You know, you set a broad timeline and, time frame, and you're going to miss broadly. You set a specific date, give yourself a cushion perhaps. So I would suggest that, internal, maybe September 1st, external, we say no later than September 8th, or, pick the date, but maybe if we come back next week, have what would be a reasonable, time frame. I understand not wanting to set unrealistic community expectations, but I think the less specific we are, the more questions we engender. And so I think we got to, I think specific dates personally would be helpful. I also think, and perhaps we're not ready to do this today, but we have to be much more specific and much sooner of what the work sessions are going to be when we're going to take up particular issues. I think we need to start now looking at the dates in September and prioritizing what discussions are going to occur on which specific meetings. If we need to move them for whatever reason, we can, but we have to hold ourselves accountable, to this, because I think, again, aim small, miss small. I think we got to be much more specific in terms of our timeline here. So again, we don't have to do that today, but if we can do it by next week or at the latest by the end of July, I think we're going to run into a lot of trouble, personally, if we wait until September to get the report and then we start trying to figure out how to schedule these meetings. I think there is very little chance, if we wait until that late date to start putting items on the calendar, that we're going to get this done before the end of October. So I just wanted to note that, if 1 week is unreasonable, I said earlier, reasonable, repeatable, and actionable, then at least, before we go into August recess, we have that final meeting. But I think we need to, be transparent and accountable, regardless of what folks feel about this process, which has gone on a long time. I think there's been frustration that we have changed the process repeatedly throughout this, that the deadlines have moved, that the dates have moved, that the way in which we were going to take these issues up, have changed. And I think we need to the best that we can, seize control of it and hold ourselves accountable to it, and have that level of transparency. So I'll put that out to colleagues. I guess the last piece here is on the chapters. I have been more or less agnostic to whether we have specific chapters on items or whether we add language in the report. I think there's a lot of different ways to address this. I do think if there is consensus on the environmental chapter, as has been shared in the staff report, that we should add an economic chapter. I think adding one and not the other is a poor message to send. So I just wanted to note that for colleagues. And then the last piece is the question about implementation. There have been a lot of back and forth, and Ms. Dunn, I appreciate all your work on this. We've talked quite a bit about this specific question. There have been a lot of discussions about whether this is an implementation document or a visionary document. I feel very strongly, and by law, I believe it is required to be a visionary document, that it sets a broad strategy and policy for how we will make planning decisions, but won't necessarily rezone and change zoning specifically. So if we're going to do an implementation portion of this and add it in, I think it needs to be an explanation of the process of how it happens. And so I just wanted to, we've talked about that, I just wanted to note, I think that was the intention, but I think there's some confusion when we start talking about implementation. It's not to say, here's the vision and here's how we will implement a vision and specifically what it will be. It's, here's the vision, and in order to carry out that vision, here is the process that will be undertaken where those discussions will take place. Basically an expectation setting, a level setting of, here are the, the various ways that it happens to have it all in one place. So I would be supportive of that high level explanation of how implementation works, but I think we need to be very careful and be very specific to not dive into the implementation of the vision itself, because that's really not what a general plan is intended to do. And so with that, I'll yield back. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what you just said. Councilmember Katz, followed by Councilmember Novato, who's back in the queue, and then Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to the team. I am most impressed with your credentials, and I look forward to working with you. I think it has to be said, it's been said, I think, in a couple different ways, that the timeline is important, but getting it right is the most important. And I agree that we need to have updates as we're going through this, not just so that we are aware of where you are in the process, but so that the public is aware of where you are and we are in the process. We need to be effective and efficient, but we need to be making certain that the public is aware at every step of what we're doing. And I do applaud what has been done, although I didn't agree with everything that has been done. I applaud it, and I do believe, as I think Councilmember Friedson just mentioned, I think when we're talking about this 30-year plan, that we explain the entire story every time. We can say this plan is not changing the zoning, but there has to be an explanation right at the same time. But in order for it to happen, zoning and ZTAs would have to change, would have to take place. I think that's very necessary, and I think that's been part of the disconnect of what we've said. And so I think that we need to be doing this in an exact, a continuing way, and we need to keep the public every step of the way involved. And as far as for the specific chapters, I agree with Councilmember Friedson that I think we need to add both.
Environment, and I agree that we should do those, and I think we should just, at that point, we will have a redundancy in the document, because every chapter has been written to highlight those three issues. Then we're adding 2 chapters back. We can just add all 3 chapters back. We can essentially take the content that we brought into each chapter on those 3 topics, pull them back out, make them stand alone. You're doing your work. That will help you ensure that you're able to have the content that you need to take through your process, because it's more readily rewritten, because much of the economic development and environment content is already in the document. It's just a section in each chapter rather than a standalone chapter. So it's been a little, I think council members have been in different places as to what exactly to proceed with here, but I would recommend to the body, I think we've got the content there. We can pull it back out, make the 3 standalone chapters. Staff can do that expeditiously. Then the process that we're engaging will have that content, so that there isn't a question as to whether that content was included in the process. That's important. And then we'll have a draft document back in a timeline that we can proceed expeditiously in September to wrap it up. So suggest that to the group.
I think that's a good recommendation. It's consistent with the organic trajectory of our discussions to this point. I don't know that we need a formal motion on that, but I think there's, unless there are objections from colleagues regarding that approach, those 3, it's consistent with what Councilmember Friedson just mentioned earlier as well. So then, Ms. Dent, I think there's consensus around colleagues with that approach. I did have a couple questions for our consultants, and associate myself with all the comments of my colleagues. Very impressed with the breadth of knowledge and background and context from which each of you bring to this really important work. As you all, I'm sure, have been made aware, this has generated more correspondence than just about anything we have received this last year on this body. And so there's a lot of interest and a lot riding on doing our best to get this right. And there are a wide range of perspectives on this issue. Those that feel it's ready to roll right now would prefer that we vote on it today, and others that would prefer that we throw this away in the wastebasket and start all over again. And I don't think either one of those is accurate or true. I did want to better understand the intersection between Dr. Bonner Tompkins's office and your all's work. If you could just articulate a little bit more what that will look like, and how her team will be involved in this process, and then I have a couple follow-up questions from there.
Sure, of course. So as we were writing the solicitation, and we've been corresponding with the team here, Dr. Bonner Tompkins has been involved in that, and also, as you'll remember, we now have a racial equity social justice manager, who is Ms. Singleton, from previously the clerk. And so they are both involved in our correspondence and meetings that we'll be having with the consultant team, setting up deliverables, timeframes, check-ins, all of that. So the contract was written from the Council Central Staff Office, so it's not being overseen directly by the Office of Legislative Oversight. It's being overseen by the Council staff, but with communication and coordination and involvement with Dr. Bonner Tompkins, of course.
Great. And then as a follow-up to that, and I'll just reiterate something that my colleagues have said, but so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are really terrific organizations both within and outside of county government that can be tremendous assets, and frankly have already done some legwork on this. Some of them have already been mentioned. But I know you are, but if you could articulate sort of a running list of some of those coordinating organizations, you don't even have to enumerate them. I just want to confirm that you're developing that now and have a plan in place to actively engage with them, both, again, inside and outside of county government, as well as our park and planning staff, which have, engaged in a lot of dialogue and discussion too.
Sure. So we have started that work. I think coming into this, it was understood that this was going to be a relatively heavy list. So before we even had pen to paper, we were reaching out and trying to get an understanding of, the lay of the land, who's doing what. And obviously there are a lot of folks who are already doing this work. So we've had meetings with Office of Community Partnerships. We've had meetings with folks like Everyday Canvassing, who are doing some of that door-to-door engagement work. And we have a lot of meetings scheduled already with, various, community serving groups. Obviously doing this kind of work, faith-based communities, really important. So I appreciate council members, recommendations to reach out to, Action Montgomery. But, we have a robust list, and it kind of like our work is going to be kind of trying to distill, which of those are kind of, most, far-reaching in terms of their networks. I know More is one, Impact Silver Spring. There's just so many different folks across the board that are doing, various forms of this work. We've been engaging with planning staff as well, kind of, attending, pop-up events and meetings, trying to get to know people and figuring out, who's serving the most vulnerable populations, who's doing food drives, like where can we, show up and begin to, leverage those, networks and efforts to get, surveys out or, solicit people for focus groups and that kind of thing. So, the work is not done. We're like, a week and a half into our contract, but we understand that there's a lot of folks that need to be brought in, and I think the way we like to work is in a collaborative nature, and so we really want to be respectful of those who've been on the ground, that know the history of the county and know the communities, and really show deference to them in terms of how we get the word out about what we're doing.
Just one comment to add to that. Not only do we have a good list, which we're still developing, and will be looking for suggestions of groups to be in contact. We have relationships with a lot of these organizations already. We at Public Engagement Associates have worked with pretty much every group that's already been mentioned here, and others on previous work we've done in Montgomery County. So we're not starting just with a list, although that's important. They're actually folks we know, and we've been in touch on previous projects, so we'll build on that.
I appreciate that. So just closing thoughts on this specifically, and then Councilmember Reamer's back in the queue as well. So, and Councilmember Reamer articulated, I thought, reasonably, that there's been a difference of opinion on this document, even between the legislative and executive branches, to put it mildly. But we're all on the same team here. And so it will be important for us to actively engage executive branch agencies. As an example, I thought our regional service center directors did a fantastic job. And serendipitously, we're having a brown bag lunch with them that starts in 20 minutes. So we got to get going here. But I would just put on the record now, as has been the case in so many other examples, that we expect our executive branch partners to be strong partners in this, and to help us expedite this in a way that's reasonable so that you all can get the information that you need for us to be successful. With that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember Reamer, and then Ms. Dunn, if you can summarize what you think you've heard today to make sure we got it, that'd be great.
I just wanted to say again, More certainly is an organization that's out there. Their member groups are active. Some have more reach and some have less. Actually, in Montgomery, I've been to community meetings that they've organized with 1,000 people in a church. Communities that are affected by the work that we're talking about. They have deep, broad reach in this county, and they are doing the work every single day. They're not just on Twitter or Instagram. They're in the communities and in the living rooms. So I just wanted to share that perspective as a legislator. I've seen what the groups do, and some have more grassroots and some have less. And I know that AIM has a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn, can you summarize what you think you've heard today, just to make sure we're on the same page?
Sure. So with respect to the consulting work, I mean, like they've already mentioned, they've already hit the ground running. We have a meeting following this with planning staff. We're going to go upstairs while you're with the regional service directors, and we're going to collaborate and talk about and leveraging the work that's already been done and get started. We will have regular updates for the council body. Certainly we'll have one in July before you go on recess that'll update you and the public about where things are. It gives them a couple more weeks to really flesh out that comprehensive outreach plan and to engage in it so that when we come back we have something of substance to talk about. We will make sure that we have some dates fleshed out as well. I'll have to work with the council president's office as far as what you think about scheduling in the fall. And as for the chapters, it sounds like that the council body is supportive of having individual chapters. You as a body have already unanimously said you wanted one on racial equity and social justice, which is what the consultant will help with. We'll provide them with all those materials as a basis to do that. And then another chapter on environment and economic development, in which we will take much of what's in the current Fed committee draft and make it in a more targeted location. We'll look also through the correspondence and materials we've received to make sure that we are hitting everything that's sort of involved with what that means.
Great. I think that you got it. So I don't see any other questions or comments from colleagues. We have a plan of action here. Thank you very much, Ms. Dunn, and thank you to all of you. We look forward to working with you. All right, that takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is an introduction of bills. We start with item 4A, which is Bill 1722, Public Ethics Law with amendments. The lead sponsor is myself at the request of the Ethics Commission. Public hearing is scheduled for July 26th at 1:30 p.m. Ms. Wellens, if you can give us a very quick overview of this, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, President Albornoz. As you mentioned, this bill was requested by the Ethics Commission. The bill would clarify that certain ethics provisions that already apply to county vendors under the county procurement law also apply to vendors of the Housing Opportunities Commission and vendors of the Montgomery County Revenue Authority. In addition, the bill makes a whole variety of clarifications to the ethics law that have been identified as a result of changes to state law and that have been identified by the state Ethics Commission and recommended to us. And it will be taken up by the GO committee at the appropriate time after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. So that bill is now officially introduced. That takes us on to item 4B, which is Bill 1922, Bond Authorization. Lead sponsor is once again myself at the request of the County Executive. Public hearing is scheduled for July 12th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. Mr. Smith, could you talk about this bill?
Sure. The council is introducing this bill at the request of the county executive to authorize the county to issue certain bonds, to authorize the bonds and bonds previously authorized to be issued to be consolidated for sale and to be issued, sold, and delivered as a single issue. And as noted in the council's staff cover page, this is the council does this time to time because the value of bonds that the county can issue is the uncodified section, and from time to time the council must increase the bonding authority for the county in order to issue bonds, and this is respective and consistent with the council's approval of the fiscal 23 capital budget. And as noted, the council will have a public hearing and tentative action on July 12th, as well with the corresponding companion resolution in order for the county to take advantage of the current rates. That is it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So Bill 1922 is now officially introduced. That takes us on to item C, which is Expedited Bill 2022, Office of Food Resilience. Office of Food Systems Resilience, established. Lead sponsors myself at the request of the county executive. Public hearing is scheduled for June 28th, 2022 at 1:30 p.m. I just want to express my appreciation to the executive branch for taking into account the feedback provided by this body. I also want to thank Chair Navarro from our Government Operations Committee for her very thoughtful suggestions on how to proceed with this important office that is going to help coordinate our food security system across our county, and I think it's important for a lot of different reasons. Ms. Wellens, anything else you want to add to this?
No, thank you, Mr. President.
Great. So with that, again, public hearing is scheduled for June 28, 2022. This will likely come back to full council rather than joint committee so that we can move forward and hire these folks as quickly as possible. So with that, Expedited Bill 2022 has now been introduced, which takes us on to item number 5, call of bills for final reading. The first is Expedited Bill 722, Fire and Rescue Services, credited service for Group G members. Ms. Wellens, could you walk us through this?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This Expedited Bill 722 was submitted on behalf of the executive. The bill results from a negotiated agreement between IAFF and the executive, and the collective bargaining agreement that prompted this legislation was before you previously, and the council indicated its intent to appropriate funds necessary to implement the legislation for FY23, and then the council did in fact appropriate $337,000 for the purpose of implementing Council Bill 722 in FY23. What the bill would do is to provide for certain members of IAFF would be eligible to receive up to 24 months of credited service towards their retirement at no cost to the employee, and it is based on prior U.S. military service. I'm happy to try to answer any questions, and we also have representatives from the executive branch, the Office of Labor Relations, and the Office of Management and Budget to answer questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the collaborative work. Chairman Katz, I'm going to put you on the spot. Did you have any comments that you'd like to make?
No, other than we should be doing this, and I'd be happy to be the first person to vote in favor of it. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you, Chairman Katz. I don't see any other questions or comments from colleagues, and so this is a roll call vote.
Mr. President, I am so sorry. I neglected to give you an important clarification. There, due to a drafting error on my part, we do need a clarifying amendment. This amendment is found on page 2 of the staff memorandum, and it has been previously vetted with IAFF and the executive. IAFF had testified during the public hearing that this amendment was appropriate and acceptable in order to clarify the language. So as staff, I would recommend that you take up that amendment prior to the roll call vote.
Move the amendment.
Move, Mr. President.
Moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Chairman Katz. No discussion. All those in favor of the amendment, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. All right. So with that, we have an amendment, so can I get a motion to move forward the bill for final reading?
So
As
moved.
amended. Moved by Chairman Katz, seconded by Councilmember Hucker. Could we go to the roll call?
Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Rice is absent. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes.
Thank you, and apologies to the chair of our GO committee. I should have referenced the fact this was a joint committee effort, so apologies, Chair Navarro. That moves us on to expedited bill 822, Fire and Rescue Services, Length of Service Awards, Program for Volunteers with amendments. Ms. Mullins?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This bill, expedited bill 822, would increase the amount of the length of service benefits to certain local firefighter and rescue department volunteers. This bill also resulted from collective bargaining between, in this case, the MCV FRA and the executive, and it came before the council previously and the Public Safety Committee previously in the context of the resolution to indicate the council's intent to approve and appropriate funds and implement provisions of the collective bargaining agreement. And in addition, the council appropriated funds in order to implement this legislation for FY23. I believe the fiscal impact for FY23 is around $1,600. So again, this increases the LoSAP benefits to reflect what was negotiated with the union. This one does not have any needed clarifying amendments. It does need a motion because although the committee looked at it before, the bill itself did not officially go to committee.
Got it. I don't see any questions or thoughts from colleagues, and so can I get a motion to accept expedited bill 822 for final reading?
So moved.
Moved by Council Vice President Glass, seconded by Councilmember Katz. And now we can go on to the roll call vote.
Mr. Katz?
Yes.
Mr. Katz votes yes. Mr. Jawando?
Yes.
Mr. Jawando votes yes. Mr. Reamer?
Yes.
Mr. Reamer votes yes. Mr. Hucker?
Yes.
Mr. Hucker votes yes. Ms. Navarro?
Yes.
Ms. Navarro votes yes. Mr. Rice is absent. Mr. Friedson?
Yes.
Mr. Friedson votes yes. Mr. Glass?
Yes.
Mr. Glass votes yes. Mr. Albornoz?
Yes.
Mr. Albornoz votes yes.
All right, let the record show both bills passed unanimously among all those present and virtual. Thank you very much, Ms. Wellens, and thank you especially to our first responders for your extraordinary work and diligence and sacrifice. We continue to respect and appreciate it every day. That moves us on to our consent calendar, which is item number 6. Can I get a motion to accept our consent calendar? Okay, moved by Councilmember Jawando, seconded by Councilmember Hucker. Any discussion regarding the consent calendar? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous among all those present and virtual. So the consent calendar is approved. With that, colleagues, we will now recess. And just a quick reminder, we have a brown bag lunch on the 4th floor with representatives from our regional service centers. Thank you. And we will be back at 1:30 for public hearings. We are adjourned.
Like you're overusing your body. It was really fascinating to suddenly be scolded and reprimanded. I feel like it's become so much more balanced, brought so much more balance to my life and practicing in a way that will be wholesome. The mental peace and the emotional stability has helped so much too for me.
Lift the collarbones up.
During the pandemic, Sonia resorted to teaching her classes on Zoom, which she said was a great success.
That's good, Nikita.
Zoom classes have been going extremely well through the entire pandemic. One, we're not limited to a classroom size, so I can have, 30 people on my Zoom room versus